In the summer of 1967, San Francisco found itself in the midst of a cultural revolution. The Summer of Love. As thousands of young people with similar social, cultural, and artistic values all gathered together in the city. The artistic centre for this hippie revolution was the famous Haight-Ashbury neighbourhood. 1967 was the pinnacle of the city's growing movement of artists like the Charlatans, Grateful Dead, Big Brother and the Holding Company, and of course, Jefferson Airplane. Fueled by psychedelic drugs and a desire to open their minds to new experiences, these bands were famous for playing long improvisational shows, which allowed them to explore diverse musical sounds and influences. As the industry tried to capitalize on this incredible artistic movement, these bands often struggled to translate the psychedelic experience onto tape. But in 1967, Jefferson Airplane was able to do just that with an unusual song filled with hallucinogenic literature and cultural references, as well as musical influences of early 20th century classical music, Spanish bolero and Indian raga. The song was White Rabbit. Hello there, it's Warren Huart here. Hope you're doing marvellously well. Welcome back to another episode of the series. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and if you hit the notification bell, you'll be notified when we have a new video. And if you're into production, you can go to producelikeapro.com and sign up for the email list and get a whole bunch of free goodies. Jefferson Airplane formed in 1965 and was one of San Francisco's foundational psychedelic bands. Singer Marty Balin and guitarist Paul Kantner brought together the original lineup, which included bassist Bob Harvey, singer Signe Anderson, drummer Jerry Peloquin, and guitarist Jorma Kaukonen. Their first gig was on August the 13th, 1965, opening night at the Matrix nightclub in San Francisco. From these early performances, the band received positive reviews from critics like the San Francisco Chronicle's John Wasserman and Ralph Gleason. After their first concert, Wasserman wrote that the band didn't play folk music nor blues nor rock and roll, yet there is something of all these forms in the Airplane sound, and concluded, although there are but hints at this time, it is entirely possible that this will be the new direction of contemporary pop music. Gleason would go on to become one of their biggest early supporters, putting that encouragement into print and predicting that they would be signed to a record label very quickly. Peloquin left the band not long after their debut and was replaced by Alexander Skip Spence on drums. They became regulars in the live music scene of the Haight-Ashbury and surrounding areas. They were regulars at the Matrix, of course, but they also played events like Longshoremen's Hall in San Francisco on October the 16th, 1965, Bill Graham's November 6th promotion concert for San Francisco's Mime Troupe, events which inspired Graham to pursue his famous psychedelic dances at the Fillmore soon after. And sure enough, the band performed at Graham's first Fillmore concert on December the 10th, 1965. The band quickly landed a record deal with RCA. Before recording their first album, Jefferson Airplane Takes Off, Jack Cassidy replaced Harvey on bass. Although the album was recorded in 1965, it wasn't released until August of 1966. By the time of the debut's release, Spencer Dryden had replaced Skip Spence on drums. While the first album sold only modestly well, it was popular within the burgeoning hippie scene in San Francisco, and it seemed that Jefferson Airplane was well on their way. They continue to be one of the most important live performance groups of this time. Some of the important live shows they performed in 1966 were the Berkeley Folk Festival and the Monterey Jazz Festival. Although the band was doing well, Anderson announced her departure from the band and performed her last concert with them at the Fillmore on October the 15th, 1966. The others immediately invited vocalist Grace Slick, the lead singer of The Great Society, to front Jefferson Airplane. The Great Society had performed with Jefferson Airplane at many Bay Area shows between 1965 and 66, and so the members of both bands knew each other very well. Jack Cassidy was especially enthusiastic about bringing Grace on board. I liked Grace's singing because we wanted a good, aggressive singer for the band. She had a unique timbre and sound to her voice. Signe, who was our first singer, came out of the folk background and had a contralto voice with smooth harmonies. What I like about Grace was the fact she stood right at the end of the stage and made good contact with the audience. Paul had put that vocal sound together for the first year of Jefferson Airplane, where it had the smoothness of his influences in folk music. I liked the individual sound to Grace's voice, so I asked her to be in the band. This was the girl. Also, her attitude was very different. She didn't have a submissive attitude at all, which is what we wanted. We wanted an equal in the band, someone you could work off, someone with fire in their eyes. With her departure from the Great Society, Grace Slick brought 2 songs with her to the Jefferson airplane.
Don't you want somebody to love? Don't you need...
Somebody to Love was written by Grace's brother-in-law and Darby Slick. The next song was her own composition. White Rabbit and Somebody to Love both became hits for Jefferson Airplane and showcase methods for condensing long-form psychedelic music into a 3-minute pop song format. White Rabbit in particular left a legacy for its ability to take the psychedelic culture and experience found in this historical moment and translate it into the recorded medium.
The underground brewing of psychedelia came into mainstream consciousness in 1967, the Summer of Love in San Francisco. There are several key components to understanding psychedelia in this particular moment, not the least of which was the desire of these young people to come together and seek out knowledge and experiences outside of mainstream institutions in which they were raised. It was a pushback against the idea of normalcy that was promoted in the 50s and influenced by the Civil Rights Movement and the Vietnam War. Rather than placing trust in the long-standing institutions of their parents' generation, they sought out new experiences and ways to expand their minds. One of these ways was, of course, experimentation with drugs, specifically marijuana and LSD. Ex-Harvard professor Timothy Leary argued that these drugs would open your mind to perceptions and ideas you would otherwise never have been able to access. In 1964, author Ken Kesey took a group of LSD proponents on tour in a psychedelic-painted school bus to bring the drug and hallucinogenic experience to as many people as they could. To heighten the experience, they would put on shows with light and visual effects, accompanied by sound effects and rock music. They became known as the acid tests. Kesey brought his acid test to San Francisco in 1965, around the same time that a group of like-minded young people, who called themselves the Family Dog, began hosting dances in the city. The rock music coming from local bands like Jefferson Airplane, the Grateful Dead, and the Charlatans became the accompaniment soundtrack to the psychedelic trip and paralleled the experience of taking these drugs through long improvisatory musical performances. The music mirrored the psychedelic trip in addition to being used to enhance the experience. However, as the music industry attempted to capitalize on the popularity of psychedelia and began signing San Francisco bands to produce records, they ran into the challenge of translating this expansive music into the expectations of popular song. Music which had largely been centered in the 60s on standard song forms and limited to about 3 minutes in length. The standard format did not match the psychedelic songs as they were being performed live at these dances. And White Rabbit also began with this challenge. The original version was about 3 times longer, with a meditative introduction that was over 4 minutes long. It was perfect for setting the scene in a live performance. But when Grace Slick brought the song to Jefferson Airplane and they rearranged it for the record, the band focused on a different element, the Spanish bolero. Grace has said that she wrote the song after a psychedelic trip in which she listened to Miles Davis's sketches of Spain. But it is French composer Maurice Ravel's 1928 orchestral piece, Bolero, which has the most clear references for the listener. It is not simply a Spanish rhythm that sparks this connection, but the entire structure of the song, which is constructed as a slow building crescendo. Ravel's Bolero begins very softly and builds very slowly over the course of the piece. Likewise, Jefferson Airplane's song begins quietly, almost hauntingly with its percussive and bass start. And both pieces grow and grow. Grace Slick ends her performance and the song with a loud, energetic climax singing "Feed Your Head." She told The Guardian in 2021, "The line in the song Feed Your Head is both about reading and psychedelics. I was talking about feeding your head by paying attention. Read some books, pay attention." And it was that idea of fusing together deep outside of the box thinking, and in this case, literary references, with eclectic musical concepts. And that creates the atmosphere of the psychedelic experience in the song. With White Rabbit, Grace Slick, and Jefferson Airplane were able to bring that late 60s Haight-Ashbury, San Francisco atmosphere into the confines of a 2.5-minute song, in a way that maintained the expansive experience of what psychedelia was all about.
The rhythm guitar is played by Paul Kantner. It's similar to a Spanish bolero rhythm. Grace Slick has said that she originally wrote the song after an acid trip, during which she listened to Miles Davis's Sketches of Spain for 24 hours straight. It's in the key of F sharp, which is not the most usual key for guitarists. But this perhaps comes from the fact that Grace originally wrote the song on the piano. She said, "I wrote White Rabbit on a red upright piano that cost me about $50. It had 8 or 10 keys missing, but that was okay because I could hear in my head the notes that weren't there." The lead guitar was played by Jorma Kaukonen and has an obvious Spanish influence. But you can hear also the influences of the modal jazz of Coltrane, as well as a melodic framework of Indian raga and the vibrato sound heard in the performance of this music. Kaukonen also remembers that the mic was very likely very closely placed to the guitar. He explained to the Harvard Crimson, "Recording guys like Rick, these guys were masters of mic placement. RCA had 2 books out in the 50s about mic placement, more about recording classical music and orchestras, but are still kind of the Bibles for guys that are interested in that kind of stuff. And those guys back in the old days had that stuff down." Bass was played by Jack Cassidy. Drums were played by Spencer Dryden. The bolero rhythm is like the bolero rhythm in Maurice Ravel's classical piece, Bolero. Grace Slick's vocals draw out the mystery and fantasy of the lyrics. She adds lots of vocal turns and adds vibrato, especially at the end of phrases. The lyrics, of course, are full of references to Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, focusing largely on the drug references that parallel the psychedelic experience of the time. The song begins, "One pill makes you larger, and one pill makes you small. And the ones that mother gives you don't do anything at all. Go ask Alice when she's 10 feet tall."
And the ones that mother gives you don't do.
Other references include the hookah, smoking caterpillar, and mushrooms, as well as the character references to men on the chessboard, the White King and the Red Queen, and the Dormouse. The band was actually concerned that it wouldn't pass censorship because the lyrics were so obvious. Cassidy explained, "Grace had 2 songs that she brought with her from Great Society. But White Rabbit was the song we were going to leave off the album because we thought it would never get released. We thought it was going to be censored. It eventually became a big deal because it made it onto the album and got dispersed into the crowd wherever we played." The song and the rest of the band's second album, Surrealistic Pillow, were recorded at RCA Studio in Hollywood and produced by RCA staff producer Rick Gerard. He played an active role in taking the band's live psychedelic music experiences and adapting them for the recorded medium. Although the band sometimes struggled to blend their creative visions with Gerard, Kaukonen explained that, "We sort of bristled against some stuff, just because we like to think we came up with everything ourselves. But at the same time, I think that everybody in the band, even Paul, Grace, and Marty, recognized that we were in uncharted waters. When you go into the studio and record something, it's a different ball game from playing a live show. I don't think the album would have had the same sonic quality had the members of the Airplane, myself included, been able to drive the bus more. So, did Rick make us do stuff that we probably wouldn't have done if left on our own? The answer is yes, and after the fact, my personal opinion is that this was a good thing." The recording sessions also had the influence of Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead, who Kaukonen credits with helping the band in their arrangements and dynamics. The setup and recording process was largely live, Cassidy recalled. "We recorded it out at Sunset and Ivar, in a huge room at RCA where they used to record 101 strings. The room was massive, so we basically set up the instrumentation in the middle of this room and played it live onto 4-track. It was very simple to record. I just led the song out as a bass part like Bolero, ripping off Ravel. It was all slow and slinky. It gave us that atmosphere we wanted. The recording sessions took place in the fall of 1966, and the Surrealistic Pillow album was released in early 1967. The third single from the album, White Rabbit, was released on June the 24th, 1967, simultaneously with San Francisco's famed Summer of Love. and hit number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. It's an incredibly representative song of the psychedelic era. It remarkably takes the psychedelia of San Francisco's live music scene at the end of the 60s and translates it into a successful pop song experience. It has held a lasting legacy too, as one of the go-to pieces in television and film for representing not only the historical time, but also the moments of enigmatic fantasy, mystery, and more specifically, hallucinogenic drug use. With White Rabbit, Grace Slick and Jefferson Airplane successfully captured the experience of psychedelia and recorded it through song for generations of listeners to experience ever since. The bolero thing is quite obvious to me now that we go back and analyze the track. All I can say is when I first heard it, the way Grace sings it is probably actually the most powerful thing. It's almost preachy. You know, one pill makes you larger and one. It's creepy. It's sort of, you know, growing up in the UK, in England, I knew all the references. I mean, Alice in Wonderland is pervasive. I mean, everybody reads it at school. Everybody knows about it. And the lyrics, you know, I'd seen the movies. I read the books. Alice in Wonderland, Alice Through the Looking Glass. I knew what it was when I first heard it, but it was the way she delivered it with that bolero backing that's just kind of creepy. And not that I'm saying I may or may not have taken any psychedelic drugs in my life. We'll leave that for interpretation. But even if you haven't, it does feel like some out of body, otherworldly experience. There's nothing like this song. The first time I heard it, I was just like, this is weird and creepy. I didn't know whether I liked it or not. But now it's right. It's come to signify that whole movement, that whole idea of taking a hallucinogenic drug and that experience that you would have. It is cartoonish in its imagery. It's creepy in some kinds of ways, the way she sings it. But moreover than that, it just feels otherworldly. It doesn't sound like anything else before or anything else since. And it is no accident that if you're trying to create something, like we said, something enigmatic, something otherworldly, something out of fantasy or mystery, or to translate the idea of a trip, either a mushroom or an acid trip, there is no better song ever. And I don't think anybody will ever do something better to give you that feeling. It's a masterpiece. I didn't think of it as a masterpiece the first time I heard it, but ever since, it just keeps growing on me and growing on me. And I suppose if I was doing film and TV licensing and I wanted to take a song that could translate all of those things simply, this is the song. There is not a better song for it. So hats off to everybody involved in it, Grace Slick and every member of Jefferson Airplane, of course, all the wonderful production, and the fact that it was recorded on 4-track is insane. And another lesson in, you know, getting it right first time and not needing a gazillion overdubs to do something that's an absolute masterpiece. Thanks everyone for watching. If you've got any other ideas for songs or artists or albums or genres, please let me know down below. We love reading your comments. So long, everybody. So long, farewell, la wiedersehen, au revoir, toutes scenes, ciao, goodbye, so long, farewell, la wiedersehen, au revoir, adios, goodbye.